I killed Margaret Hale. That's what the file says in the clean font that always makes death look tidy. St. Martin General hums like a refrigerator at 2 a.m. Monitors purring in every room, antiseptic air biting my nose, fluorescent corridors bleaching everyone into ghosts. The elevators sigh open and shut, hush, hush, like they're keeping secrets for us. The barcode scanners chirp soft little beeps that usually mean normal, safe, accounted for. I believed in those beeps. I believed I could hold the night together if I charted straight and handed off clean. I'm Claire Bennett, the nurse with the neatest notes, the one who knows where the spare IV tubing hides, the one who never cries at work. On nights we live in small rituals, folded handoff sheets in our scrub pockets, initials circled on the whiteboard, nicknames and inside jokes in the coffee-stained break room that smells like burnt hope. I know the rhythms of this place better than my own apartment. I knew Margaret's too. She was the kind of patient who made the shift feel human. Silver bun, salt dry humor, always asking if I'd eaten. She'd tap her crossword with her pen, daring me to beat her, and laugh when I messed up. She tucked her feet into thick socks and watched late-night weather like the Ocean Report was a soap opera. At midnight, she was fussing about her daughter's parking ticket. At 4:12, her heart dropped off a cliff. The code felt wrong, like running through water. My hands did everything they were trained to do. I still feel the click of her sternum under compressions, the way the room went too bright. We lost her. I washed my hands and watched them shake anyway. By noon, I had an email from admin with words like incident and negligence and pending investigation. By 2, whispers bled down the hall. Claire? And then a quick look away. The union rep, Dana, met me in a supply closet and told me to keep my mouth shut and not sign anything. She kept checking her phone like she didn't want to be seen with me. A detective, Rios, clean haircut, nice voice, sat with me in a family room and said he just wanted to help me help myself. He smiled like a promise. I don't trust promises. Shock turned into this hot, mean guilt that made me scrub my badge until the plastic went cloudy. Then something colder shoved in. No, I know my work. I know Margaret. So I unlocked everything I could. I pulled my shift notes, my vitals, my messages. I ran audit trails until my eyes burned. The numbers started talking back. Med administration times stacked in a neat little staircase at 3:10 a.m. across patients I wasn't even covering. Lab values doing this weird seesaw. Dips so clean they looked planned. Spikes that landed just after handoff. Supply room logs missing tiny things nobody notices are gone unless you count. Dispensing reports that say pulled, but not when, not by who you'd expect. The kind of mess that looks like noise unless you never stop counting. It didn't look like a screw-up. It looked like someone hiding behind our beeps and our trust. Someone inside. I grabbed at answers and they split like smoke. If a dose happened at 3:10, where was I? With Mr. Alvarez down the hall, whose scanner shows I was there at 3:08. My screen says my password was used in Margaret's room 2 minutes later. My hands weren't in 2 places. Someone's were. I called pharmacy. I stared down risk management. I told Rios to stop calling me nurse, like a role was a shield. Dana warned me I was making it worse. When I finally found the thing that froze my lungs, it was stupid small. A lot number on a clear bag buried in a supply log. A quiet edit no one would think to hide. It tied to a badge that wasn't mine. Kayla's, my favorite person on nights, the one who covered me when I ran to the bathroom. Who brought me gummy bears at 3 a.m. Josh held Margaret's hand while I charted, her initials beside a pull she didn't chart, stamped into a time I'm supposed to own. I stared at that screen until my eyes watered, until my brain tried to make it mean anything else. A second later, my phone buzzed with a blocked number. No caller ID, Just a text, plain and cold. Stop digging before you end up like her. I'm Claire Bennett, 33, nurse. I work the night shift on the elderly ward at St. Martin General, a place that often feels more like a mausoleum than a hospital. The hum of machines is my constant companion, monitors beeping like metronomes, the hiss of oxygen tanks punctuating the silence. The air is tinged with that antiseptic scent that cuts through everything, and fluorescent lights flicker overhead, casting stark shadows that elongate into the corners of the sterile white walls. It's too cold to be comfortable, and every time I take a deep breath, it feels like I'm swallowing ice. My nights are ruled by the rhythm of the ward. I count and measure, follow the protocols like a well-rehearsed dance. I've learned to tune out the whispers of loneliness in the hallways, the soft cries of families who have gathered in waiting rooms, holding on to hope like a fragile thread. I take my time with the patients. Margaret used to joke that I was her night owl. She had this way of transforming long shifts into fleeting moments of warmth, her laughter echoing through the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. It's the small things, really, that tether me to this life. The gratitude in a patient's eyes when I help them eat, the stories shared over a cup of lukewarm coffee. They don't understand why I made this choice. They wonder why I can't just find a 9-to-5 job and have a regular life. I gave up a lot when I chose nursing. My marriage crumbled under the strain of my long hours and my constant absence. I have a daughter, Mia, who is 11, and I missed her last birthday for a shift that should have been routine. The guilt of that day still clings to me like the smell of disinfectant. I sent her flowers, but they wilted before she could even unwrap them. Sometimes I feel like all the sacrifices I've made are buried beneath layers of sterile linen and medical procedures. I hate how distant I've become, both physically and emotionally. Living alone has its comforts and its loneliness. I've got my childhood dog, Max, to keep me company, but he's more a furry alarm clock than a friend. I find myself talking to him in the dark when the world feels too heavy, sharing the small victories and the crushing defeats of a shift. Sometimes he stares at. I try to tell him I'm strong, that my work matters, but it's hard to believe it when the weight of responsibility and regret pushes down on my shoulders. There are signs of tension in the air, little fractures in our routine. I overheard Dr. Graves speaking sharply to a resident earlier today, his voice rising above the steady hum of the ward. It's not like him, but we've got our fair share of struggles. Staff shortages, endless paperwork. The pressure to keep everything running smoothly. I can feel the unease blossom like a summer storm brewing just out of sight. And then there are the families. Some smile and thank us, while others demand answers, their voices full of desperation and anger. It's a dance I learned early on, balancing compassion with the shields that come from experience. I wish I could explain how fragile life is, how it can flicker out without warning. I want them to see that behind every number is a person, a life full of stories and struggles. It's hard to keep my heart anchored in a place where everything feels so cold and clinical. The humanity of my patients gives me purpose, but it also makes every loss hit like a punch to the gut. I carry their names and faces with me, shadows that haunt me long after my shift ends. The clock ticks on, relentless and unforgiving. I can't shake the feeling that something is coming, something I can't quite put my finger on. A shift in the air, a whisper of danger in the sterile walls. As I step away from the muted chaos of the desk and into the dimly lit corridor, I can't help but wonder how long it will be until something breaks. I leaned against the nurse's station, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights echoing the exhaustion pooling in my bones. There was always a kind of war in the corridors of St. Martin General, a constant push and pull between chaos and care. I felt it today more than I had in weeks. It was nearing midnight. the hour my patients were the thinnest, and a hey. Then it happened. Claire, Dr. Graves' voice sliced through the air, sharp and accusatory. What do you think you're doing with Mrs. Aldridge? I blinked at him, my heart racing. Our patient, a frail woman barely holding on to her memories, had been restless. I'd been trying to soothe her, getting her a cool cloth for her forehead, and talking softly about the flowers outside her window while I updated her chart. The last thing I wanted was for that sweet woman to unravel before my eyes. I was just checking on her, I replied, forcing calm into my voice. She needs more than you're giving her, he snapped, cutting me off, his face shadowed in irritation. I held my breath as the eyes of the nearby nurses turned toward me, wide, their unspoken words curling in their throats. I could feel their sympathy too loud in the silence. Little did I know that this attitude would put me against the entire hospital. Mrs. Aldridge's family was present, their faces crumpled with worry. I could see them leaning forward, eyes darting between us, seeking either support or confirmation of their fears. "What's wrong with her?" Mrs. Aldridge's daughter shouted suddenly, her voice filled with a mix of desperation and anger. "Why aren't you doing more?" It was a small accusation, but in here, those words could cut more deeply than a knife. I swallowed hard, willing my hands to stay steady. I didn't want to escalate this further. That was the last thing any of us needed. If you've ever been unjustly accused, you know exactly how I felt. I stepped closer to Mrs. Aldridge, who looked at me confused but trusting. "I'm here," I reassured her, trying to block out the noise. "We're going to take good care of you." My heart ached as I turned back toward Dr. Graves, whose glare bore into me like a spotlight. "It's not just about checking vitals, Claire. It's about being proactive." He leaned against the desk, arms crossed, a knowing smirk creeping across his lips, like he was exposing some great flaw in my character. I sensed the tension in the air thickening, tangling around us like a noose. And that was the moment I realized it was only the beginning. I maintained my silence, letting his words hang, defying the urge to defend my choices to the very end. In a flash, I recorded Mrs. Aldridge's status in a medical chart, capturing his snide comments like snapshots of a low blow. Perhaps I was aware that validation wouldn't be found here, only among those who lived and breathed the duty of care alongside me. Dr. Graves made his exit, but the atmosphere remained heavy with accusation. I caught a flicker of betrayal in Mrs. Aldridge's eyes, watching as fear threatened to swallow her whole. I could feel her daughter's disappointment too, simmering like oil heating too fast in a frying pan. Maybe you understand the pain of seeing someone fragile being ignored. A tension gnawed at my gut when I approached their bedside and hovered just close enough to feel the warmth radiating from their concern. I spoke softly about the importance of resting, about the treatment plan, all the while fighting against the pit in my stomach. A shift in the way Dr. Graves' menacing presence slithered deeper into our interactions echoed somewhere within me, like a forgotten melody returning to haunt. As I departed from the room, I couldn't shake the feeling of daggers in my back. A sudden surge of anxiety gripped me, and I turned sharply to the nursing station, only to catch Dr. Rios watching me. His face was carefully studied, like he was a mix of apprehension and concern, but neither emotion found its way to his lips. A murmur of whispers fizzled in the corners of the station, the quiet judgment of my colleagues like the rustling of wings in the dark. I stilled myself behind the desk, shifting gears in my mind as I prepared for what I needed to do next. And it was in that silence that everything began to collapse. The tension in the air felt palpable. When had our little family of caregivers become such an audience for self-righteousness and unfair judgment? I took a deep breath, and just as I did, the monitor alarm echoed through the corridors, shattering every ounce of tension in the moment. The sound reverberated like a warning bell, and I froze. Something was terribly wrong. Before I could think, I heard Mrs. Aldridge's daughter shout again, "What's happening? Someone do something!" In that instant, destiny was already decided, and I still didn't know. The air shook with urgency as I sprang into motion, uncertainty tightening around my resolve. My heart raced, part of me terrified of the unforeseen chaos that may arise from this web of contention. I couldn't ignore the threat lurking in the shadows. Not now. The monitor alarm blared like an air raid siren, drowning out the exchanged glances and unspoken worries circulating the room. I rushed into Mrs. Aldridge's room, my heart pounding harder than the beeping machine that echoed my fears. Her frail body was limp, and an unfamiliar air of panic seeped into my skin. "What's happening?" Her daughter's voice, high and shrill, sliced through my concentrated chaos. "It's going to be okay," I said, forcing strength into my voice, though I could feel the quake in my hands as I reached for a cool cloth again, a meager attempt at calm in a storm swirling around. I assessed her vitals, tuning out the shadows of accusing eyes outside. I could feel Dr. Graves' eyes burning a hole in my back, though the heat reflected more of his judgment than the sterile fluorescent lights overhead. My racing heart had already entered overdrive. His presence made it impossible to breathe. As I made notes in her chart, a single glance confirmed my words. Just a quick assessment," I stammered, the hairs on my neck prickled with the sense of impending scrutiny. But even as I spoke, another cry echoed from the hallway. I turned, just in time to see a cluster of nurses and family members gathering outside the door, their gazes flicking in my direction. In that moment, I was laid bare, exposed under the weight of half-truths and assumptions. I could feel the heat creeping up my cheeks. Humiliation sat heavy in my gut. The murmurs danced through the air, a symphony of speculation and discontent. "That's the nurse? I thought she was supposed to be good." The words clawed at me. I felt the tremors in my soul, but I had no idea it was still going to get worse. Another alarm blared, and the tension escalated. Mrs. Aldridge's daughter turned to me, her expression twisted with fear and anger. "Why isn't she stable? What have you done?" The accusation hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I opened my mouth to argue, to defend my efforts, to talk about how nobody could predict these things, but the truth crumbled in my throat. And just like that, without any warning, the door swung open to reveal Dr. Graves, who stepped into the chaotic scene with an air of authority. "Claire, I need you to step back," he said, his voice filled with disdain. "You failed to act appropriately." The words struck me like a physical blow, each syllable wrapped in judgment that curled around my skin. "Excuse me?" I managed to gasp, trying to keep the tremor from overtaking me. I didn't trust myself to speak further. I could feel eyes boring into me, every face sharing a collective betrayal. I saw whispers dart among my colleagues, the unmistakable judgment of one nurse against another, their silent stares like fraying threads threatening to unravel everything I'd worked for. I felt a wave of anger rise within me, the kind of fire that overshadows fear. But before I could harness it, Graves waved a dismissive hand, shoving the phantom urge into the dark corners of my heart. "Just step back," he insisted. The wall felt close as I stepped aside, a flood of frustration crashing over me. Everyone's eyes were on me. I could see Mrs. Aldridge's daughter hovering, caught between disappointment and horror. She was a stranger to me, yet I felt the weight of her accusatory gaze like a shroud. "This is unacceptable," she spat, her judgment laced with the sharp edge of despair. The fingers of my conscience dug deep, pulling me down with every word. "I'm doing everything I can," I managed to say, but my voice cracked, revealing the cracks behind my crafted facade. They were all waiting for me to falter, to confess my inadequacies. Dr. Graves didn't even look at me. I was just a backdrop to his show of control. Before anything more could spiral, an orderly rushed in, breaking the tension with urgency. "We have to move her," he called. Yet the room was still heavy. The murmurs wouldn't die, clinging to the air thick as fog. Just like that, I thought we might finally regain focus, that the storm might pass, but the ground was shifting beneath me still. As I turned to organize the equipment, I caught sight of my crumpled lab coat hanging loosely, stained with evidence of my day's struggles. I buried my face in the fabric for a second, a momentary reprieve, but my heart sank as I thought how strangely symbolic it all felt. Buried under layers of cloth was the truth of my failures. In that last moment, as they rolled Mrs. Aldridge away, I spotted someone standing outside the room, silhouetted against the harsh lights of the corridor. "Stop," I said, panting, dread knotting my stomach again. "Where's she going?" But all I received was an indifferent glance. What I didn't know, what none of us could have braced ourselves for, was the future of repercussions looming ahead. And as I stood there, reeling from an emotional beating, it hit me. They were all looking at me like I was the problem, a vessel for their disappointment. But I wasn't the villain here. I could barely hold myself together, but I was still standing. That's when I heard a voice that would change everything. "I know what happened, Claire." My pulse quickened. Who was that? Would this person be my salvation, or was I about to sink into deeper waters? I felt the weight of everyone's eyes as I stood there. The electric tension in the air almost palpable. The nurses, the doctors, the family members clustered in the hallway outside Mrs. Aldridge's room. They were watching, waiting, judging. My chest tightened, and I could feel the heat creeping up my neck as Dr. Graves emerged from the chaos, his back straight, shoulders squared, wearing authority like a badge. "Who is responsible for this?" he boomed, directing his gaze straight at me. All I could do was stand there, rooted to the spot, my heart pounding like a drum in the silence. "I was caring for her, Dr. Graves. I was right there," I stammered. But the words felt weak against the storm swirling around me. "What you were doing was clearly not enough," he shot back, point his finger like it was a weapon aimed directly at my heart. The audience behind him gasped collectively, a silent gasp that filled the room with an overwhelming chorus of disbelief. They'd already made up their minds. My guilt was palpable. "Dr. Graves, please." I tried to interject, but he continued, drowning me out. "You haven't just failed your patient, you failed this team." His voice was raised now, full of disdain and too many accusations. The nurses shifted, glancing sideways at each other, as if weighing their allegiances. I felt the sting of their judgment pressing against me like a weight too heavy to carry. "Excuse me," I managed, my voice cracking. I was following her treatment plan, and no one can predict these things. "You call that a treatment plan?" he interrupted, his voice like a whip, cutting straight through my defenses. "You were negligent. Everyone here knows it." The words fell like stones, and with each one I felt the urge to sink into the floor. My hands balled into fists at my sides, tremors racking my body. I was on the brink of tears, but I refused to let them fall in front of this throng of witnesses. "Dr. Graves, she was stable when I left her. I can't be held responsible for what happened after that," I cried, searching for an ally among the crowd, but all I found was silence, an ocean of disdain. Even the floor tiles seemed to conspire against me, cold and clinical, reflecting the sterile white walls that felt like they were closing in. And then I spotted Mrs. Aldridge's daughter, her face twisted with anger. "This is unacceptable," she shouted, directing her fear and sorrow toward me, pinning me down with her glare. I wanted to reach out, to explain that I had cared for her mother, that I had done everything in my power to keep her comfortable. But the words wouldn't come, trapped in a well of suppressed guilt and hurt. "Claire," Dr. Graves barked, "do you understand the risk you've put this hospital in? You're not just putting your practice on the line. You're jeopardizing patient trust. We could lose our license over this. I could. Oh, spare me the lecture, I snapped, the words escaping in a rush of anger. I felt the audience pull back, like a sudden gust of wind had swept through. His eyes widened in disbelief, and I braced myself for the backlash. I am in this job to care for people, not to collect blame like trophies, I said, my voice rising, heart racing. I could feel the breaths of my colleagues, their judgment heavy and unyielding, wrapping around me like chains. I moved to take a step forward, the urge to defend myself surging through me. But then a chair was pulled away, and I stumbled, flailing to regain my balance, the mockery evident. Does everyone see this? This is what we have to work with, Dr. Graves sneered, his lips curling as he pointed at me, the crowd murmuring softly in agreement, their whispers like knives slicing through my resolve. It was as if the very air in the room conspired to humiliate me, every gaze filled with disappointment and disbelief echoing in my mind. I could feel their collective judgment seeping into my bones, and I battled against the "You're in over your head, Claire. Maybe it's time for a break," one of the night shift nurses murmured, her voice flat and devoid of compassion. I wanted to scream at her that I was trying to hold on, trying to keep afloat as the tide of their accusations pulled me under. But the words remained lodged in my throat. I swallowed hard. This isn't just about me. You're all part of this system. We're supposed to be a team, I pleaded, seeking understanding, as frustration painted my words with desperation, the conviction wavering. I could feel the eyes shifting, uncertainty flickering in their depths, but I was losing the battle. Claire, if you can't handle the pressure, maybe it's time to consider whether you belong here at all, Dr. Graves said, his voice dripping with condescension. That hit me like a punch. He was right. This could be the end for me. The very real threat of suspension weighed down heavily. The possibility of not only losing my job, but the respect I had fought so hard to earn. I felt the ground beneath me crack, my feet slipping with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Almost like I had already surrendered to the suffocating reality of my failures. But as I stood there, rage swirling inside me like a tempest, a small voice of strength whispered from somewhere deep within me. I was not finished yet. You don't get to decide what I am worth, I said fiercely, though doubt gnawed at the edges of my words. My chest tightened around my heart, all the breath hitching and stalling. There was still a fight left inside me. I am here for the patients, even if I seem to have lost your faith, I said, pushing against the walls of shame encircling me, defiance mingling with the sickness in my stomach. Then I saw him, the unexpected face that would shift everything, standing just behind the silent crowd. Rios, his brow furrowed with concern. I hadn't even realized he was there until that moment. I know what happened, Claire, he said, his voice steady, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Hope sparked within me, a flicker against the storm. The air between us grew thick with tension, his gaze like a lifeline and a noose all at once. Dr. Rios stepped closer, his expression a blend of concern and something else, perhaps understanding. I could feel all eyes trailing us, the weight of their judgment amplifying with every silent heartbeat. Just when I thought I might drown in the swell of apprehension, he leveled his gaze at me, his mouth forming words that felt like an anchor in a sea of chaos. Claire, listen, I need you to know, this isn't what you think, he said, urgency lacing his voice. The whispers around us faded to a dull hum as I focused solely on him, desperate for any sort of reassurance. But what he was saying didn't quite line up with how the world had been spinning all night. My heart raced, each pulse echoing in my ears as I tried to gauge his intent. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Just trust me for a moment. I saw something in the pharmacy logs that doesn't add up. The timestamps for the medication, they're off. I think someone has been accessing files without authorization." His words struck me like a lifeline tossed into stormy waters, but they also raised red flags in the back of my mind. Could it be true? Could someone really be manipulating the system while we were all running on empty, just trying to maintain a shred of sanity? But before I could process the implications, I caught a glimpse of something in his hand, a crumpled piece of paper peeking from the pocket of his scrubs. He must have seen my eyes dart toward it because he hesitated for a moment, guilt flickering across his face. I thought it might be connected. The paper burst forth with a sudden urgency, and the fluorescent lights overhead brightened as if to spotlight the revelation unfolding. What he handed me was a copy of the medication schedule, but something about it made my stomach twist. I instinctively reached for it, inspecting the smudged ink as the clock continued its relentless tick in the background. "What am I looking at?" I asked, confused, as I scanned the details. "Look at the lot numbers. They're different from what we enforced on the last checklist. The records of dispense don't match the orders." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping as his brow furrowed. "And, Claire, I think someone is trying to frame you." Frame me. The words hissed through the silence like a serpent. It moved beneath my skin, and I inhaled sharply, the room suddenly feeling unbearably tight. The thought sat like a stone in my throat. "What are you trying to say?" "There's a chance," he hesitated, gathering himself as though the weight of his next words threatened to take him under. "This medication that caused the incident in Mrs. Aldridge's case was pulled from a lot that shouldn't have been available. It all adds up, Claire. But? I pressed, dread pulling at the base of my spine. "What do you mean?" "If we dig deeper, it might implicate someone else entirely." The flicker of hope in his voice was almost soothing, like a balm against my rising panic. We were teetering on the edge of a revelation that could turn my world upside down. But who? And just as fear tightened its grip again, Dr. Rios pulled me closer, lowering his voice. "I need to show you something, but you have to promise me you won't say a word, not to anyone." "Not yet." His eyes glimmered with secrecy, and an unsettling thrum ran down my spine. What could possibly be worth the risk? "Just trust me. I have a source who works in pharmacy. They noticed something strange, and they sent this to me." He pulled out the crumpled paper again, which now looked oddly like a map of evidence. "Trust him." The words felt heavy on my tongue, every ounce of anxiety threatening to burst in my chest. Where do we even begin? "Look," he said, quickly scanning the room as if wary of unseen ears. "Let's sneak into the break room. There's a monitoring device there. I think we can access the last 30 days of prescriptions and see who else had access to that lot number." "Rios, this is huge. What if we get caught?" My voice quivered with uncertainty, but there was something in me, a flicker of hope ignited by what he had revealed. "Even if we do, the evidence holds weight. You didn't do this, Claire. I know that. We need to take a stand." As we walked together toward the break room, every step drummed hollow inside me, heavy with implications. Rios pushed the door open, cautiously, letting a thin slice of harsh light illuminate our surroundings. The moment we stepped into the room, I noticed it, something dull tucked beneath the table. I bent down and snatched it up, my heart racing. A forgotten file. I opened it cautiously, the pages worn and dog-eared. The contents were more shocking than I had hoped to find. The very prescription numbers outlined in a series of redacted notes and what looked like signatures. But implicit among those scrawls was a name I recognized, hastily written on a note that slipped into a hidden corner. Kayla. It was like a punch to the gut, my mind racing with 100 thoughts. The one person I had trusted the most, the one who had been my ally during long shifts, suddenly seemed wrapped in mystery. My mind flashed back to all those little moments we shared over gummy bears and late-night coffee, her laughter an anchor amidst the chaos. But what if she wasn't who she seemed? Claire? Dr. Rios' voice pulled me from my thoughts. What's wrong? I couldn't raise my eyes to meet his. Dread wove tightly around my throat at the very notion. This couldn't be right, could it? It was too unbelievable, too twisted. I laid the file down carefully, breaths shallow, as something unfathomable washed over the edge of reality. Rios, I think there's something we're missing. I glanced over at him, searching for a piece of the reassurance I desperately needed. But there was just silence, the weight of my discovery hanging between us like a storm cloud ready to burst. And then, in that moment, I realized someone knew the truth and had just let it slip. A knot tightened in my stomach as I stared at the paper in my hand, that single name staring back at me like a challenge from the past. Kayla. Suddenly, the memories flooded back in sharp clarity. The gummy bears she shared, her infectious laughter echoing in the break room, and that unwavering support she'd given me during late shifts. I could almost see her skirting around the chaos, her scrub slightly rumpled, always willing to help. How could she be involved in this? Rios, this can't be right, I said, barely able to keep my voice steady. My heart raced as I took a deep breath, fighting against the tide of betrayal rising within me. We need to confront her. We have to show her this. Are you sure that's the best move? His voice was cautious, as if sensing the barely contained ferocity bubbling beneath my skin. What if we get it wrong? Wrong? No. I shook my head vehemently, a sense of determination pulsing through me. How many patients have to suffer before we expose her? I won't let that happen, not again. I felt the heat on my cheeks, fueled by a cocktail of anger and dread. We snuck back into the corridor, but before I could formulate a plan, I caught sight of Kayla, her usual carefree demeanor replaced with a nervous energy as she approached the nurse's station. My blood ran cold. It was like watching a predator stalking prey, and suddenly I was the one feeling hunted. "Claire, there you are," she called out brightly, yet I could hear the tremor in her voice. There was a moment, just a flicker, where our eyes locked. In that split second, I saw a crack in her mask, a hint of panic that made my stomach churn. Did she know the truth was coming? I took a step toward her, my resolve solidifying. "Can we talk? In the break room?" It wasn't a request. It was a command masked in the guise of normalcy. "Sure, of course," she replied too quickly, a falter on both sides carrying unspoken weight in the air around us. I nodded at Rios, and we led the way into the break room, a mere corridor of fluorescent lights down the hall before we drifted into the fading hum of the machinery of care. Once inside, I slammed the door shut, cutting off the din of the ward just as tightly as I wanted to slice through the deceit. Kayla's eyes widened, confusion painting her features with a veneer of innocence. But the facade melted away as I pulled out the file and slapped it down on the table between us. "Stop playing games, Kayla. We know what you've done." Her reaction was instantaneous. She flinched, her brow knitting together in disbelief. "What are you talking about? I haven't done anything." "Don't lie," I spat, my breath quickening with each word, each remembrance of the patient whose life hung in the balance. "This lot number is part of what got Mrs. Aldridge killed, and it leads straight back to you." Kayla paled, her skin transforming to a ghostly shade that didn't suit the vibrant woman I had shared countless shifts with. Her composed demeanor shattered, and I watched her wrestle with the truth. "Claire, please, you have to believe." "Believe what? That you're innocent? That you didn't take her life?" My voice rose dangerously, heavy with rage. "You accessed medications without authorization. Those codes don't lie. And they connect to you." The words ignited a fire in her eyes, a twisting mixture of desperation and fury. "You don't understand. They were going to fire me. I didn't want to lose my job." She stepped forward, a frantic plea shimmering in her voice. "I didn't think anyone would get hurt. I thought I could handle it." My pulse roared in my ears. This was not how I had imagined it. My heart ached for the girl I once admired, but the betrayal cut so deep that any semblance of sympathy cracked under the weight of her actions. I could hardly breathe as her teary eyes flicked up, searching desperately for lost trust. At that moment, the break room felt like a shrine to our shattered friendship. I hesitated, the battle raging within me. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to maybe extend the hand into the abyss of her mistakes. But every time I thought of Mrs. Aldridge and every other patient she had wronged, that empathetic part crumbled. "You put all of us in danger," I whispered, my voice shaking with the fury of a volcano just before it erupts. "Claire, please." She reached out, her hand trembling slightly. I was scared. "I didn't mean for any of—" I raised my hand to halt her words, the wave of regret filling the space between us like a physical entity. "That's the problem, Kayla. You acted with selfishness, not thinking of the consequences, not thinking of the patients, and because of that, someone died." The weight of those words hung heavily, a shattering realization for both of us that clanged like metal screeching against metal. The door swung open, and Dr. Rios stepped in, glancing back and forth between us, sensing the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. "Is everything okay?" His voice was cautious, almost protective in the way he stepped closer. "Not yet," I murmured, feeling the adrenaline of the confrontation fuel my rising confidence. "But we're about to find out." "I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean to hurt anyone." Kayla dropped her bravado, eyes wide and panicked. "I don't want to lose everything. Please don't tell anyone." "Justice isn't selfish," I shot back. "And neither is patient care. You were meant to be my ally, and look where we are." She faltered, her bravado cracked wide open. I can change. I'll make it right. Just let me fix it." But an ice-cold fire pulsed through me, her words dripped with self-preservation rather than accountability. "No, that's not how this works. The medical team needed to know. Mrs. Aldridge's family needed to know. I had to take a stand for her and all my patients who deserved better than this viper's nest of manipulation." "Claire?" Her voice wavered. Something within me flickered at her desperate tone, a moment of almost pity threatening to rise from the ashes of betrayal. But the memory of the chaos she had caused held firm like iron chains in my heart. I felt the lingering twinge of connection and heartache at the surface, but I shoved it down, liberating the anger that had built there. "You put the lives of our patients in danger. You made a choice, a bad choice, and I can't live with myself or the consequences of keeping this a secret. I'm going to report you." The word report landed heavily like a hammer against glass. Kayla's eyes widened, the realization dawning upon her that there was no escaping responsibility. "No, Claire, please don't. I'll do better. I'll fix it. Just give me a chance." But I steeled my resolve, the choice echoing through me like thunder. "You had your chances, Kayla. You hemmed yourself in with your actions. I can't allow you to put anyone else's life on the line." I sensed Rios right behind me, the quiet strength radiating from him as he stood ready to support me, a bond forging out of shared truth, one we had almost lost. As I turned to leave, the door swinging open to the flood of nurses and doctors outside, I felt the air shift. The tumult I had faced suddenly gave way to empowerment. "This is taking too long. Time to own the truth." And with each step away from her pleas, I could feel a new sense of purpose igniting within. I was no longer buried under layers of blame. I was emerging, equipped with unwavering truth and justice. I smiled softly. "You'll face what you've done, and you'll learn to accept the consequences." The last visual I had of Kayla was etched into my memory forever, her eyes darting from anger to desperation as I led the charge toward truth. I met her gaze in that moment, a mixture of sorrow and strength cemented in my heart. For the first time in a long while, Standing up for what was right felt like victory. Sometimes the truth is the hardest pill to swallow, and some deserve the bitter taste. The days rolled into weeks, and as the shadows of that fateful night gradually receded, I found myself stepping into the light in ways I hadn't anticipated. I took time off after that night, not just to heal, but to clear my head and find my footing again. With every hour spent away from the chaos of St. Martin General, I found strength in the stillness. I leaned into support groups, leaned into old friends I hadn't spoken to in ages, and slowly pieced together a version of myself that felt whole again. The whispers of the ward that the call to do better didn't just come from the need to fight for my own redemption. It came from a genuine desire to contribute to the betterment of nursing, to honor those like Mrs. Aldridge who deserved care without compromise. I found a new purpose like a cool breeze on a warm day, refreshing yet exhilarating. Months later, I stood before a small crowd at a binding conference, talking about the importance of ethics in nursing and how we must always uphold the trust we've been given. With every word, I felt the weight of my past lift, the knowledge that my experiences could help others make informed choices. It was a circle I never thought I'd close, but standing there, I could see the faces in the audience, shifting from curiosity to understanding. The irony wasn't lost on me that my darkest moment had birthed a passion for change. I wasn't just a nurse anymore. I was an advocate, and it felt incredible. Sitting at a quaint cafe later, the echo of laughter amidst the chatter. Life had its twisted sense of humor, rewarding the scrappy resilience forged in hardship. As I lifted my eyes to the world outside, vibrant and breathing, I realized that perhaps sometimes you truly have to lose yourself to find a new beginning, a stronger self. The moment I stepped into the break room, I felt the weight of the world off my shoulders. The mentorship program was officially in motion, and I was finally ready to share my story with a new generation of nurses. The room buzzed with new hires, their scrubs fresh and their faces painted with a mixture of eagerness and anxiety. I took a deep breath, letting the familiar scent of coffee and antiseptic propel me forward. "Welcome, everyone," I started, scanning their faces, each one a canvas of hopeful dreams. "You're beginning your journey in a place that can sometimes feel overwhelming. But trust me when I say, this is a space of love, care, and resilience." As I spoke, I shared pieces of my experience, the shadows I highlighted not just the technical skills they'd need, but the heart behind each action. I wanted them to understand that nursing was more than a job, it was a calling. Some attendees nodded vigorously. Others looked on with wide eyes, perhaps identifying with the fear I had once felt. My heart swelled with every shared moment, every connection, the kind of bond that can only be formed in the crucible of shared purpose. "Don't ever let anyone dim your light," I urged them. Watching their faces shift from uncertainty to a newfound spark of determination. Hold each other accountable, and remember, this job is about so much more than protocols. It's about compassion. The clock ticked on, and the meeting flowed effortlessly, the energy in the room building like a wave cresting, ready to crash. We shared stories, laughter, and a few tears, with me weaving my own journey into a tapestry of encouragement. By the end, I felt a warmth surging inside. This was my purpose, and I was Phi. As I wrapped things up, I caught sight of Kayla, standing hesitantly at the doorway. She looked different, more subdued, a shadow of her former self. I waved her in, and the room quieted, all eyes shifting toward her. "Hey everyone, I just wanted to apologize," she said, her voice shaky but clear. "I took a wrong turn, and I know my actions hurt a lot of people. I'm working on making it right. Every single day." The tension hung for a moment, but then I saw it, compassion reflected in the faces of my colleagues. They understood the journey, the struggle. Slowly, people began to nod in solidarity. I could feel Kayla's presence strengthening, grounding us all in a moment of shared humanity. As the meeting concluded, I stepped outside breathless. I had faced the thing I feared most, the judgment, the uncertainty, and had risen to meet it. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Rios, a simple message. "Proud of you." A smile broke across my face. Days passed, and I noticed a shift in the atmosphere of St. Martin General. It blossomed with renewed vigor, the staff far more willing to support one another, share stories, and build trust in a way that had been frayed before. The whispers of tension had transformed into laughter and encouragement, replacing the persistent pressure with a sense of resilience. In those quiet moments, I learned the value of vulnerability. I understood that even when storms roll in, we could find shelter together, a camaraderie stronger than fear. As my journey continued, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, a knot of hope that wove through my chest. The memories of those late-night shifts lingered, reminding me of the fragility of life and the strength that lies within when we lean on one another. This was how love thrived in a hospital. Through care, through trust, through standing up not just for ourselves but for each other. And as I stepped through the doors for the last time that month, I resolved in my heart to keep fighting for patients and for a compassionate nursing culture that never wavered, ready to mentor anyone who walked through those doors with a dream to heal. Life goes on. Struggles continue. But one thing's for sure. I wouldn't trade this journey for anything. If you've made it this far, I need you to take action now. Subscribe immediately to this channel so you don't miss out on exclusive stories that dive deeper into the world of nursing and healing. Smash that like button right now to feed the algorithm.